It's two buildings that sort of made up a combined sort of civic center of sorts.
Well, you had 6, so if you want to drop one to talk about.
Well, you think this is a live show where I shake the...
You can't see, but my body exploded to confetti. Go ahead.
Time waits for me.
Tom waits for me.
Tom Boomhauer waits for me.
I keep doing it.
Piglet Greg is here tonight.
You guys have heard my pig Jethro sitting on my lap. He wants some screen time. Even though we don't have screens.
We adopted a pig. He's the official mascot of LA Meekly.
He rolls around in mud.
What I'm going to be talking about is the old courthouse and the old Hall of Records building.
Oh, cool. Lizard people.
Yeah. Before the wizarding world of Harry Potter reshaped the Burbank skyline forever, there was another Gothic castle compound that defined the look of downtown LA, the wizarding world of court arbitration. As long as there's been law in lawless Angeles.
I see what you did
Father-in-law joke.
San Bernardino.
San Bernardino. There's been need for a courthouse to enforce these laws or lack thereof.
Yeah.
The first one this city had was in 1850 inside the Bella Union Hotel, which was the city's first hotel, located on Main Street just north of Temple.
That's where Pete Briggs had his barbershop.
Really?
Yeah.
It's all coming together.
It's
all coming together. They'd rent rooms that were available and decide who should be free or go to prison in between the room being used for high-class adultery.
With money being transacted.
Go downstairs, get a haircut, and get Wolfskill's mistresses or whatever we were talking about earlier.
Ruin your family. Go ahead.
In January 1852, they moved into the home of the county attorney Benjamin Hayes on Main Street until November 1853, when the city bought the Roche House at Spring and Court from Jonathan Temple to hold court, literally in, until March 1860, when they rented yet another house from former Mayor John Nichols on Main Street to use.
And his associate, Jerry Dimes. Go ahead. Dad jokes.
Nichols and Dimes.
That's
our comedy duo. Nichols and Dimes. But it came time for the city to move out of their former mayor's house and get a courthouse of their own.
Get out.
But Dad.
I said get out.
And stop sleeping with my mistress. So in May 1861, they moved into the Temple Market block where City Hall now is. It wasn't City Hall though, and renamed it the Clock Tower Courthouse because it had a clock on all 4 sides of it, and it was now a courthouse.
Wow, there's the creativity.
Wait till you hear the name of the next one. This was fine until 1891 when the city outgrew even that and they needed something new. What they came up with was a design by the firm of Curlett, Eisen, and Cuthbertson.
One of them's got to be dropped. 2 bad names, but 3, come on.
I'm looking at you, Curlett. Larry Moe and Curlett.
A Curlett closet.
It was going to be located in the tastiest part of town, Pound Cake Hill, which was which was on the south side of Butter and Glaze Street. It was on the south side of Temple between Broadway and Spring, just across the street from what is now City Hall, where the Criminal Justice Center now is next to Grand Park on the other side of the LA Times building.
Oh, all right.
This was the site where Los Angeles High School was, which was the city's first high school. They demolished it to put this big thing here. On April 26, 1888, they laid the cornerstone in a big ceremony presided over by not only the Freemasons, but also a group that called themselves the Knights Templar. But I think they were just an Elks Lodge with a really big ego. Like, I can't imagine the...
Yeah, it is one of those old men clubs that is named... I'm sure it goes back centuries.
Where the Covenant
they, stabbed a dragon at some point.
I'm sure the Elks once stabbed a dragon.
They weren't always old. Sometimes they were young.
No, they were always old.
Born old.
Baby Boss. Cookies are for closers in the Elks Lodge.
I want to quit this podcast right now.
I saw a trailer today when I was watching Kong for Baby Boss, and they said cookies are for closers in that trailer. I wanted to walk out.
I wanted to burn that.
I screamed
down.
like Kong. They had a whole back to the Knights Templar.
Yeah.
They had a whole procession through the streets of downtown LA, complete with a choir and the ceremonial drinking out of the Holy Grail. That didn't happen. Also in attendance was a young Mary Foy. She watched this all happen.
Really?
Yeah, the
Librarian
old city
Mary Foy?
librarian.
Yeah.
It wasn't until 1892 that the building was complete, and what they had was considered one of the biggest and most impressive Richardsonian Romanesque behemoth in California. It had stone walls, turrets, arcades, not the fun kind again.
Ding, 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 ding,
Ding, ding, ding, ding. Oh, this arch is dinging.
Yep.
They had chateau roofs and a huge clock tower with clocks on all sides of it, one of which had the numbers from one of the old clock tower courthouse clocks on it. What really made it stand out, though, was that it was all made out of red sandstone, so it stood out from any way. Like, it was red,
Yeah,
like
red.
bright red,
Yeah.
well, like dark but
Yeah.
vibrant red, and you could see it anywhere. Like it was.
That sounds dramatic.
It was
crazy.
dramatic is exactly the word. This was the 6th courthouse location the city had, and the 3rd time it was actually in its own building and
Yeah.
not just renting a room at an almost brothel. But this was the first building the city had ever built specifically to be a courthouse. It cost $518,000 and was referred to as the Red Sandstone Courthouse, but the only official name I could find of it was Los Angeles County Courthouse number 3.
Jeez.
They went the Led Zeppelin route.
Zoso?
They used it not only as a courthouse, but it also has the post office, the U.S. District Court, and a few other federal agencies. A couple years after they opened, they added an open-air elevator shaft that sounds not only terrifying and unsafe, even by late 1800s standards.
Execution chamber?
Watch people die from 40 feet up. It became a local tourist attraction. Like, you come to town, ride the
Look at the big
open
hole.
air. Look at the hole that's just shooting you into the sky.
Who wants to see the void?
Another attraction of a sort was built in 1905 called Court Flight, or Court's Flight.
Oh, yeah. That was part of Angel's Flight, right?
Yeah, well, it was a sister to Angel's Flight.
Yeah.
A sister.
Sister.
Oh,
You have a-
please don't disintegrate her.
Gosh ding darling, damn it.
Ding dolly fine. So it would bring you up or down the hill to the courthouse. It started on Broadway between First and Temple and brought you a whopping 200 feet to get you to your indictment hearing on time. It was billed as the shortest railway in the world. It ran until 1943 when all railways were melted down into bullet trains for the war effort.
War effort.
One of the not lizard people underground tunnels also used to connect this courthouse to the also now gone county jail.
Okay.
But here's the rub. Rub me.
Here's the rub.
Here's the
Thank
rub.
you.
Here's the rub. My sore back. When the courthouse opened, the population of LA was 108,336, but by 1933, the city's population would be almost 2.5 million.
Yeah, it's crazy.
So the city was growing fast, and that meant more records and information and court cases had to be taken care of out of this big red building. That meant more staff and less space for everybody. So what they decided on was to build an equally monstrous building right next door to the courthouse to create this, like I said, it's like a civic hub for all your needs to keep tabs on the population. To do this, they got architects Frank Hudson and William Munsell, who had also done the LA County Hospital, and in 1909 started construction on what became known as the Hall of Records.
They only build stuff that looks haunted.
Yeah. We specialized in the damned. It cost $1 million to build, and despite a plot to blow it up with dynamite during construction that was thwarted by an anonymous tip,
Get the McNamara brothers back here.
it opened in 1911 just northwest of the old courthouse, where the current Hall of Records now is. It was a Gothic style and was 12 stories high, with the top split into 2 wings. Drink a Red Bull, man.
I
Dead
want to
joke.
quit. Cookies are for closers. I want to quit.
It was a building that stood out enough on its own, but paired next to the big red courthouse, it caught your eye. Even more so when in the 20s they straightened out all the streets around there, but they left the Hall of Records standing at a weird angle. So there are all these like straight aligned buildings and then this like Hall of Records. But even with this, there eventually wasn't enough room between these 2 buildings.
Yeah.
They built the Hall of Justice in 1925 to take some of the stress off the buildings, and in the 30s they started renting out space in whatever other buildings downtown would let them because they just didn't have room. But that wasn't what ended up doing these buildings in. The problem was themselves. The courthouse was falling apart. Literally, on February 10th, 1932, a chunk of the clock tower broke off and fell through the judge's office.
Save the clock tower.
No.
Stop asking me to do that.
Nobody was hurt, but the chunk was no longer allowed to cross state lines. Then, just 2 months later, a glass skylight fell into a filled courtroom. Again, nobody was injured, but there was suspected collusion between the glass and the chunk. To try to fix these constant collapses, they removed 12 tons of rock from the building and anchored the outside of it. And then came March 10th, 1933. A 6.25 magnitude earthquake hits Long Beach.
How do big stone buildings handle earthquakes? Remind me.
They normally grow bigger.
Oh, I got a wing.
That must have been a Red Bull earthquake. Dad jokes back. Cookies are for closer. Give me that cookie.
We should get our show sponsored by Dads.
Brought to you by your father.
He's not happy with you.
He wants you to call him. The courthouse was severely damaged by this, and after a huge aftershock on October 24th, the LA County Board of Supervisors vote to remove the entire building. By October 1934, the building was abandoned for demolition, but in 1935, they realized that if they could just remove the top 2 floors, the rest of the building would still be safe to use. So in July of that year, they got rid of the clock tower. Again, again, no saving the clock tower,
Yeah.
and did what I've been being commanded to do for years now and raise the roof right off. And they put on a safer roof, which is the way to do it.
Yeah, if you're going to raise the roof, also replace it with a safer
Please
one.
have the common decency. One of the clocks was given to the Natural History Museum, and the removal of it was officially called a clockectomy.
Oh!
Founding fathers joke. But later that year, they decided that now the building was too ugly, so they turned it.
My problem has been for years is that people consider me too ugly.
They treated their buildings like they treated their women. Lose weight. You're too skinny. I'm divorcing you.
My wife needs a clockectomy, if you know what I mean.
I've got a clockectomy around the face. So they turned it into a WPA project that created lots of jobs, and they started tearing it down for good January 1936, and were finished by May 12th of that year, when the destruction ended with an opening of the time capsule that had been put in the building's cornerstone during that ceremony. Inside had such exciting things as a bank book of the LA City Public Schools circa 1888, a copy of that day's LA Times, a bird's eye view picture of the Santa Ana Valley,
Still there.
a 2-cent stamp, a
Still
medical
there.
prescription, a program for the 62nd anniversary ball of the International Order of Odd Fellows, and a blank piece of paper. Which probably had some like secret
Yeah.
message written on it, but
Kill Hitler.
it's not too late. Also in attendance was an old Mary Foy. She saw it go up and come down.
Wow, that hurts my feelings.
Yeah.
What's time? What's time like?
Save the clock tower.
You would have found out.
I just realized that a time travel movie and the focus of it is a clock tower.
I never even thought
Yeah.
about that. Weird. It's a pretty deep movie. My favorite part is when he hits Biff.
My favorite line is manure. So the courthouse was gone. Ding dang diddly manure. Big bang buttily butthead. So the courthouse was gone, but starting from when it had been abandoned, the Hall of Records was being used for courthouse purposes. They also used it in the 40s to give free living quarters to military vets after World War II.
It's like, get your own place, God.
We've given you enough. We've given you PTSD. What more do you want? But not even the Hall of Records, the keeper of time, could resist how little time cares about anything. By the 50s, it was called a fire trap by the fire department, but of course, it was still being used. Put more vets in there. Then in the 60s, they were sick of the weird angle it was sitting at. It was too ugly, and they considered rotating the entire building.
Can't we just, turn it?
Can we just look at it different? But that would have cost $5 million. I don't even understand how you could move a building. So instead, they built a replacement designed by Richard Neutra in 1962 and demolished the old one in 1973 to make way for a beautiful parking lot. This time, that is true. That spot is now a part of Grand Park. But where will ye be judged when there is no official courthouse, Greg?
Where?
The Lord's house.
No, I won't go. You won't have me.
He won't let me in because I sneezed onto his tablecloth. The old one was gone by the late 30s. The courthouse, then World War II hit, and building a courthouse wasn't on anyone's mind unless it was in Nuremberg. Then after the war, several bond measures to build a new one failed, and then there were steel shortages once the Korean War started. So this led to something of a crisis where the city had no courthouse for 26 years.
Everyone's off. Everything's legal
Hall
right
pass. They had to borrow court employees from other counties and used any building they could find. Like I said, they used the Hall of Records, City Hall, the Hall of Justice, some old municipal court buildings, the Patriotic Hall. They even used the Lincoln Heights Jail as a courthouse.
Jeez.
It wasn't
That
until
old haunted butt face. Oh, the one with the empty elevator shaft?
Yeah, that old haunted butthead. Yeah. Well, they needed places with open air elevators. It wasn't until January 5th, 1959 that they opened the Los Angeles County Courthouse designed by our old friend Paul R. Williams at First and Hill, renamed the Stanley Mosque Courthouse in 2002. The clock on this one has the numbers from the clock on the old red
really?
sandstone one that had been given to it by the old clock house.
Traditions. This is
Tradition.
a town where we drag the past into a new parking lot.
Where everybody could be a parking lot if they try hard enough. Also, the original cornerstone of the Red Courthouse is still at its old site at the southeast corner of Temple and Spring. You could go see it. There's no blank pieces of paper left in it.
Aw.
Sorry, treasure hunters.
I wanted to open a time capsule and just find a bunch of stuff from like 1999. You know what I mean? Like a Los Lobos ticket to a show.
I was obsessed with the idea of a time capsule when I was younger.
Really?
I might have buried one in my old backyard. We got to go break it.
It's got some dude's hand in it.